Welcome to Sports Charlotte, the podcast about sports in Charlotte. My name is Herb White. I'm editor-in-chief at the Charlotte Post. It is Thursday, January 9, 2025. And, of course, as always...
I'm here. Cameron Williams, staff writer, 49ers and Hornets beat reporter for the Charlotte Post.
Oh, you lost track of what city you're in?
Not caffeinated. Hold on.
Yeah, you go ahead and you work that out. But
It's too hot.
But we've got stuff to talk about today, as usual, for this episode. And jumping right on in, the best part of the NFL season is getting underway. And the Carolina Panthers will not be there to celebrate the postseason.
I thought you were going to say the end of it.
Well, yeah, they did get to the end. And speaking of the end, they finished 5-12, 3 games to the good compared to last season, to the previous season. And do you have any hope going forward now that you've seen the body of work for 2024-25?
Bryce looked good in the last game. Now, it was against Atlanta, and some can argue that, Atlanta was playing for something. They were playing with a hope and a glimmer of hope to make the playoffs, and so Bryce looked good. Oh, side note, I had to point this out. For those that listen to the podcast regularly, if you took my under 5.5 win total projections, good on you. Enjoy that money. But no, I thought they were going to be right around 5 to 6 wins going into this year, and the way it started out, I was like, "Oh, they might not get there," but they found a way. I don't know what was said behind closed doors that really resonated with Bryce. That obviously him and the coaching staff and Canales and company had a talk that while he was benched, he came out and looked like a new Bryce. Looked like Bama Bryce. Looked like modern day Bryce. He started to run the ball more. Had 2 rushing touchdowns against Atlanta. So he's starting to come into his own, I think. And so get him a little bit more help. I think you need a receiver that can really take the top off. And defensively, there's a lot of holes to be filled. You could start with the line, or you could start with the corners. You could start
linebacker.
Yeah. So there's a lot that needs to be addressed there, but that's above our pay grade to figure out what they need.
Well, not just that, but our level of interest. I'm not interested in building an NFL team. So
I'm interested in covering a good NFL team.
Well, yeah, and to me, before the season started, I said a good season with Dave Canales in his first year would be 7 wins. You should just throw a parade if he got to that level. He did not. So in some instances, it was just more of the same. But I will give him credit for learning as the season went on. Those first 4 or 5 weeks, he was over his skis. He was above his knowledge. And granted, he's never been a head coach in the NFL before. But I think coinciding with that Bryce Young benching was the education of Dave Canales. And he started to figure it out as well in terms of what he can do with this group as currently constructed. There are lots of injuries, so he was playing catch-up with lineups all season long. Yeah. The defense was atrocious because you did have the injuries, but everybody has injuries in the NFL. The Detroit Lions were ravaged by it on defense, and they managed to get to the playoffs.
They managed to get the 1 seed.
Absolutely. So I don't want to hear the "we were all injured" bit, because everybody's got that song and dance. But not everybody is staying home for the playoffs. And so Canales, I think, did an excellent job of taking stock of not only his assets, but also his own limitations, his own philosophy, and adjusting as the season went along. And I think more than anything else, that was the key to Carolina's improvement this year. Bryce Young helped, but Dave Canales understanding what it takes to be a successful NFL coach, even though he's not successful yet, he's on his way.
Yeah. So, postseason now. Obviously, the draft will be here before we know it.
Mm-hmm.
What's the number one thing you think this team is going to go for with that? What, 6 or so? Wherever they pick
They're
first. Eighth. Okay. So you win and you fall back even further.
Yeah.
Anyway, who do they take eighth?
I don't know if you can necessarily put a name to it, but I would say as a position, number one, you need a pass rusher.
Yeah, that's the way more mock drafts are trending, and I think it's going to be Abdul Carter from Penn State.
If he's available, depending on how things go with the college football playoff, if he really balls out,
he might go higher.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. I've talked to some Panther fans, even some within my own family, that they're like, we still want to win. We want to prove that we can win. I'm like, once you're eliminated from playoff contention, and this was 2-3 weeks ago. Why?
Because football, unlike the NBA, the NFL doesn't reward. Well, tanking can be its own reward, but it does not necessarily put you in a better position either way. Now, if you are a quarterback needy team and you're tanking, is there really any quarterback in this year's class that just blows your mind?
Oh, a lot. Compared to years prior, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Cam Ward, I'd take any day. Yeah, I mean, Cam Ward, I know they're saying Quinn Ewers is probably going to stay in college or transfer possibly, so I'm not sure if he's going to.
Shedeur
Sanders, I think he's got more growing to do than Cam, but man, I'd take Cam Ward any day.
Okay, so if you put that class of quarterbacks up against the 2024 class or the 2023 class, is that 2025 group better than those two?
I think it's better than last year's class, yeah. I tend to think so.
Bo Nix, Jaden
Daniels is...
Caleb Williams.
Yeah, okay, forget that.
Okay.
Jaden Daniels is probably the only one you got an argument with there. I mean, Bo Nix has done well with Denver in being a good game manager. I don't think he dazzles. I don't think there's been one game I've seen him play this year where it's just like he jumps off the page like, oh my gosh, that's the next Peyton Manning.
Well, but that's the point I'm getting at. Is there a quarterback in any of those three classes where you can just say, you can put an entire team on his shoulders and he'll get the job done?
I think Cam could do that. I mean, that's just me, but I mean, when your best receiver, and I mean, this is no discredit to any of the Miami players, but I mean, his best receiver was Xavier Restrepo, and I mean, yeah, he did very well at Miami, but you put him in an NFL system where you got better receivers than a guy like Restrepo, you got 3 of them, 4 of them. I think his ceiling is really, really high, and I don't think anybody in college right now, the way college is being ran to where it's business oriented and less player development driven, I don't think anybody's just ready to go out there and put the team on your shoulders day one.
But that all comes back to my point. There isn't anybody out there who would just say, yeah, give him the ball and he's going to turn that franchise around.
Well, we talked about that with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud a few seasons ago.
Absolutely. And look at where they are now in terms of, the narrative was, Bryce Young is a bust. C.J. Stroud is the real deal. By the time the season had ended, it's like, well, maybe not so fast with calling these careers so early. Yeah. But the point is, if you don't have the infrastructure in place, no quarterback is going to succeed. You talk about Bo Nix. Denver had infrastructure and a really good coach. So he benefited from that. And if you are one of those top 3 or 4 teams picking this year, you've got issues at head coach or quarterback, or maybe head coach and quarterback. But that's the point I'm making. And so if you're the Panthers, I think that you're probably convinced that going forward, you can live with Bryce Young for a couple more years and get him some help either with a receiver who can stretch the field. T. Higgins, are you available? Or some defensive help in terms of the pass rush, because Jadeveon Clowney, he's getting up there in age, and he wasn't exactly a world beater this year. DJ Wong was okay once he got back on the field, but they could still use some depth there, and maybe even a run stopper to pair with Derek Brown. So as we've seen the NFL suddenly come to the realization that maybe a good running game can help your offense, that might be something that they would look at as well. But I think that they do have enough infrastructure now on offense to get Bryce Young to the next level, and by extension get that offense to the next level. Defense is where they're going to have to make some changes. And maybe the key change that they didn't make was keeping the defensive coordinator. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably too early to say, but next season, I think if they can build upon this and maybe get to that 7 or 8 win mark, it'll be a huge step even further in the right direction, because it takes a lot to have success at any level of football, but the NFL, it's rare. I mean, people will pick out the outliers and say, well, this team went from 0 to hero in 1 season or 2 seasons. To build that consistent program to have consistent success, it takes a long time. And I think now if Tepper will take his hands off and just give Canales his shot, I think Canales' job's safe.
Mm-hmm.
And crazy to think after a 5-win season you'd say any job is guaranteed, but I think it's safe. But progression needs to be made. If this team regresses or even stays the same next year, I think they can start having those conversations again.
Yeah, and David Tepper has already proven he knows how to use that hook. So you are absolutely right. But I think that given the runway that he built for himself this year, Dave Canales can go out and get the roster that he really wants to go out and say, well, you know what? In a division that's watered down, the NFC South is no great shakes by any stretch of the imagination. You get the 8-9 wins, you're in the hunt.
Yeah.
Maybe not for a wild card. You might be in the hunt for the division.
Yeah.
And that might be the only way to get in the South. But
yeah. Well, you got one team on the gridiron winning. You also got a team on the hard court winning. The Hornets.
They won a game.
They won a game.
After 10 straight losses.
Hey, I mean, look, I picked the right game to go to, I guess.
Lucky you.
I mean, I cover a lot of stuff, so I'm not able to be at everything. I wish there was more of me so I could be at more stuff. But I went out, caught the Hornets game the other night, and they look good. I mean, second game this season where we've seen the full accompaniment of the presumptive preseason starters. You had LaMelo, you had Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, Josh Green, and Mark Williams. It's like, I mean, it was like I was like a kid in a candy shop. It's like, finally, the whole roster is there, and look, they look good to me. Sure, there's some room for improvement, but man, the second quarter, the way they defended Phoenix and the way they forced KD into some tough shots. I mean, Booker, for him to have 37 and then for them to have lost, I think that's a testament to how well they did on Durant, despite him having 26. I think that could have been a game where you could see Booker and Durant both have 35, and they managed to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, well, the Hornets are not going to beat a lot of teams by outscoring them. they're going to have to play some defense.
Yeah.
And that's where the buy-in is necessary in terms of Coach Charles Lee and what he wants to be able to do with this group. And I watched the game from the comfort of my home, and I could see the possibilities. But as we all know, this team is brittle in all the wrong places. Yeah. And so enjoy it while you can, because chances are they're going to run into some adversity before this is all over. And to me, the other thing that I took away from that game, you can argue all you want about the Hornets' record and what that means, but LaMelo Ball is an all-star.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's got that flashy charisma to him that you see from a lot of your all-stars, and he's the total package. I mean, he rebounded at a high level, obviously can dish out assists, and then he didn't score till late in the second quarter. And I'm thinking, oh goodness, I mean, if he don't find a way to score 25, they don't have a prayer to win this game. He ended up with 32. So we're talking about a half and 5 minutes. He had 32 points.
Yeah.
So he's got quick strike ability, and that's one thing that you want to see from your floor general and your leader, that he's like, okay, well, if there ain't nobody else scoring, I can go out there and I can get mine. And man, his shot, it doesn't, for whatever reason, to me, his shot doesn't look like it has a ton of rotation, but it's soft. He's got such a soft, feathery touch on mid-range and even on three-pointers. And now granted, he took 16 threes and made 5.
Which is a pretty good percentage when you add it all up.
Yeah.
I mean, a third.
He took 16 threes.
It's the modern NBA. Everybody's launching.
They're slinging them things up left and right, no doubt. But, and he was as gracious as ever to keep the media waiting for about 15 to 20 minutes after the game before we got to talk to him. And we got his short 2 to, about 3 minutes total response time. And everybody got to ask their questions. But, LaMelo, I think his upside when he's on the court, or I don't know the better way to phrase that, the team's upside when he's on the court is as high as it's going to be. He's got to be on the court for this team to have sustained success. That's where it's at for me. But, keeping the core together is what is ultimately going to lead to more wins. Tough test tonight in LA. This will be the game that really shows me, okay, can Mark Williams and Nick Richards play? Because obviously Anthony Davis, he's a beast. He's an all-star in his own right. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a little bit of a different challenge than facing Yusuf Nurkic and Mason Plumlee. So
quite a bit. So we'll start to see what this group in its entirety is close to. Now, I don't hold out any hope of them making the playoffs.
Miles Bridges does.
Do you know what kind of run is required for them to get in position to make the playoffs?
Listen, I'm just saying, okay, this is a direct quote, okay? He said, we're about to go on a tough West road trip. I think they got 3 or 4 games out West. He says, hopefully this can lead to some type of winning streak. I never think the season is over. I still think we've got a chance to make the playoffs or the play-in. The plan is just to build off this. So, if the confidence comes from within, yeah, we're cynical media talking heads that...
I'm not cynical. I am not cynical. I'm a realist. There's a difference.
Yeah. We'll go with that. But they won a game. All is well. Let's see what happens tonight at 10:30. My goodness gracious, I have been up past 1 a.m. the last 3 days, and guess what? About to do it again.
So you sleep deprived? Is that what you're trying to get across?
Well, that's what we do in sports. We cover games late at night. We don't get home till late, and then it's like, okay, well, I ain't done anything all day besides work. So, let me flip through the TV and watch some Netflix, and then all of a sudden you look down, it's like, oh, I got to be up in 5 hours.
Well, yeah, there is that. So we'll see what the Hornets do and whether Miles' faith in his team and his own abilities where that really stands after this West Coast trip.
So we go from winning basketball to not so much winning basketball.
Well,
with our friends over
with the Charlotte 49ers, whose win-loss record is better than the Hornets, I will remind you. But
well, they also not playing. They haven't played 40-something games, but
be that as it is, what is going on with the 49ers? They seem to have a little bit of a struggle right now.
It's been a little rough. Starting off AAC play 0-3, I don't think was envisioned by anyone on the coaching staff. Coach Fern expressed his frustration. I mean, he's never a coach that's going to sugarcoat things. He's like, we didn't come out and, I mean, he said he thought in the first half last night against Florida Atlantic when they only trailed by 5 going into half, he's like, we did some things that were good that kind of got them off their rhythm, but didn't finish the half well. FAU went on a little run to take that 5-point lead, and he's like, we didn't get out in transition well. We forced 9 turnovers, to which we didn't have any points off of them. He's like, that's never going to lead to success if you're not generating scoring opportunities off turnovers. And a lot of those were live ball turnovers. It wasn't like, just a random pass out of bounds or something. They were live ball turnovers that they're not able to get out in transition, which he prides himself in as a coach, saying, this is kind of the way my offense is ran. We like to get out in transition and run with the ball. So it hasn't helped that the team's going through a lot of injury issues, which Giancarlo Rosado, the 4/5 for the groups, missed significant time there after Thanksgiving into December, right before their trip to Hawaii. He's kind of getting his feet back under him. Did lead the team with 14 points, but you can tell he's kind of getting a feel back for things. Came off the bench, actually. Nika, everyone knows Nika. I'm not going to try his last name. It's 10 syllables. But anyway, he hasn't seemed to kind of get his feel for the game back. A lot of people thought he was going to be a contributor coming into the year. He hasn't seemed to be much of one yet. Maybe a good defensive presence, but that's about it. And you got Jeremiah Oden, who he's been ruled out for the season. So it's been tough sledding. And then to think from a fan's perspective, you got 3 guys that left the team last year that are all contributing at P4 institutions, and you got Lakai Patterson at Minnesota, Igor Milicic at Tennessee, Deshaun Jackson at Iowa State, and those last 2 are playing for top 5 teams. So, yeah, I mean it's been rough. The players that they added in the transfer or from the transfer portal haven't replicated the production needed, and that was had by those 3 guys that they lost last year. So. It's been a little rough, but they're getting ready to head to Tulsa, then to Wichita State before coming back home and facing the top 20 opponent in Memphis.
This does not look good in terms of what is coming along. But I'm curious, would anybody have thought when those 3 players transferred out that folks in Charlotte would understand how good that talent was when they left?
I think it was known.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least to me, scrolling through various 49er message boards and even seeing comments on Twitter, I mean, it was known the caliber of players that left, but the hope was that in the transfer portal you could replace that. Rosado, great addition, but he's not going to replace Igor and Deshaun and Lakai's scoring production. That's not going to happen. It's just tough in the modern era for programs like Charlotte, who's kind of at that like mid-major level, that are looked at as merely as farm school. I know we've talked about it on this podcast before, how it's going to be hard for them to keep players unless money just constantly flows into their NIL fund, because these players are getting offered $200,000-$300,000 to go elsewhere, and it's like, well, why would I stay for a bag of chips when I could go get chips, a sub, and a cookie?
Yeah. Or does this now necessitate a rethink in terms of how you're stocking talent? as opposed to going in all in on the transfer portal? Do you now change gears and say, well, maybe what we need to do is develop our own and take our chances there?
We've got a good story coming out in the Charlotte Post about this whole dynamic and idea of behind finding a good balance. You do want to recruit high school kids because, there's talent all over this state. It still is, by some measures, the hoop state. Tons of talent all across North Carolina when it comes to basketball. And Charlotte does have some good players. I know I talked with Jalen Cross not too long ago, and really great player from Caldwell Academy up in the Greensboro area, I think. And so they are recruiting high school kids, but it's all about finding that balance because you don't want a kid that's coming in all scrawny out of high school having to go up against guys that have been in the weight room for 3 and 4 years, and that's just not a good recipe. The Cooper Flags of the world, they are the rarity.
The unicorn.
Not often is a 17-year-old going to come in and average 17.5 points and 10 rebounds a game. That's just not normal. So you do want to recruit high school, but you do want to recruit the portal, and I think finding the balance and not giving up completely on either side is what's going to lead to a team like Charlotte having success.
You also had a chance to check out the 49ers women's basketball team. They're struggling a little bit right now. It doesn't necessarily sound like it's talent that they're dealing with. It's more upstairs.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Coach Reed was, I'm going to publicly thank her for coming in and at least answering some questions that the media had after that game because she wasn't with it.
She wasn't feeling so great.
Yeah, from what I gather, the locker room was a little testy and a little edgy after that game, and rightfully so. To go and play South Florida, one of the top 3 teams in the AAC, so close to a 1-point loss on the road, and then to come out so flat and just really let Tulane have whatever they want. They started off the game 9-0, quick timeout by Coach Reed, and then something just didn't seem to click. You set upstairs, and that's what Coach Reed thinks it is. She thinks there's some mental, for lack of better terms, mental block that's preventing just the team going out and being aggressive against any opponent they play. They know on paper that's what they're supposed to do. Play every team with the same intensity. But when she asked her team in the locker room after that Tulane game, it's like, why did we go out and play South Florida so tough, but then we come home in front of our home crowd and do this? And we know we had to play South Florida tough. It's like, well, you just answered your own question. They get up for certain opponents versus other opponents. They're just like, okay, well, kind of lollygag, or, we might not play to our standard and think we can still win. No, you have to play to that high standard every single game, or you can get beat by 20 like you did against Tulane. And then recently, last night lost to Tulsa on the road. So it's a different challenge for Coach Reed, and she's even admitted that. She's like, this is unique for me because it's like we've got all the pieces, and we've got talented players, but it's all about tapping into what's going to resonate with them mentally that's going to get this team over the edge.
Now, it might just be me, but I'm just throwing this out here. Tamika Reed's career arc was solidified at Jackson State, a program where you had to have the chip on the shoulder because it was under-resourced. It was kind of off the beaten path when it comes to women's basketball. It was considered the SWAC is considered a lower level Division I, mid-major, whatever you want to call it. And she's right. You do have everything you need to succeed in Charlotte, but the chip isn't there.
Doesn't seem to be yet. It's funny to me because a lot of the players on this roster came with her or was recruited by her and brought out of the portal, by her. So she sees the character and she sees the behind the scenes of each of these players. So she knows what she's getting. And I don't think she would recruit players that are, for lack of a better term, soft. I think all these girls are very tough, hard nosed, and they've got a will about them. We can put it like that. And so I don't know if there's not a chip. I just think it's not big enough. I think this team, now that they are seeing, okay, these teams are going to come in, they're going to play us, and they're whooping our tails. I think now that you might start to see a little bit of a shift in, okay, this ain't Jackson State anymore. The competition's a little bit tougher each and every game, so we're going to have to come out there and play with that bigger chip on our shoulder, because I don't think it's a lack of drive or a lack of having the right pieces in place, and I think she alluded to that.